Hi, my name is Isra. I'm a third year history student at LSE, and you're watching Getting Personal with Team Upside. I think the most difficult part about writing my personal statement was actually A, cutting down how much I had said, but that's a given for most people, and B, actually articulating what I want to say, because I had so much passion for my subject, but I was like, how do I relay this in a way which is going to make me stand out and actually show that I'm worthy of studying where I am? And I think with history, what was really hard was the fact that I couldn't get any work experience which fully related to what I wanted to do. So I think the hardest part about writing my personal statement was actually finding how to prove that I like my degree and putting that into words in a way that was good enough to make me get into the unis that I wanted. And then when I finally had that, I think cutting down was a lot harder than I thought, because I had just elaborated on everything so much that I was like, okay, let's get this down to 4,000 characters. But you get there eventually. So there was two main things in this, two main beings or places. So the first one was my mum. She really helped me edit and cut down because her English was really good. So I had that kind of luck of having someone at home to immediately help me, my mum, my sister, I guess, to look at my personal statement and just see where I'm waffling and just cut down wherever I needed to just make things more concise and just getting to the point. And then also, I guess I was lucky enough to have done LSE Choice, and LSE Choice were really good at offering one-to-one personal statement sessions. And this basically got my whole personal statement turned up on its head and said, no, start again, basically. But it was really good having that half an hour one-on-one session to really tell me what was needed and what I just had to cut out because it was just unnecessary and I was just repeating myself. So I think those, between the two of having my mum and LSE, I think I managed to put together quite an effective personal statement. For my structure, I first went about listing out everything on a piece of paper that I had eventually done, basically which showed that history. And so I put that in separate paragraphs, separate sections of my plan. And then in terms of structure, then I organised my paragraphs in a way that would allow everything to link on from the next. So I had my starting point, and then my introductory paragraph was basically about how going on one of these school trips had really pushed me to study history and research it more. And then when I had basically mentioned historical research, that kind of segued perfectly into a book I had read about historical research. And I basically sat down and found links between each paragraph I could make and then put my paragraphs accordingly. So I think that's really good advice for anyone of any humanity, and particularly history, is that there are links between everything that you read and that you do. So structure personal statement in a way that allows each paragraph to go into the next. So in the paragraph that I mentioned the book, I then went on, the book was about mentioned primary sources, and then I touched on primary sources in my next paragraph in an essay that I had done. So it's about really sitting down and not just writing and methodically planning where are their links and then organising the structure around that. And then it allows the themes to stand out a lot more and kind of gives a nice flow and structure to your 1,000 characters. So I think the part of my personal statement that I was most proud of was when I had mentioned primary sources through Evan's book about in defence of history, and then I segued into my next paragraph about how I had relied on primary sources in an essay competition in my secondary school. So after Evans basically discusses primary sources, he discusses how we basically have primary sources which are a tangible form of the past, and important for historians to establish more of objectivity where it's possible. And then I basically ended that and what I thought about that in one paragraph, and then my next paragraph says, using this, I relied heavily on primary sources to write a first prize essay for a school competition exploring the 1947 Indian Partition. I had done this through interviewing my grandparents, forced from India as part of a mass migration to Lahore. And I was really proud of that because I really liked the link that I had established. For me, it wasn't about the linguistic skill that this part showed. It was more how I had effectively allowed it to flow from the end of that paragraph into the next. So I was quite proud of that, and how I basically personalised it to my own family. So I guess I got to show whoever was reading my personal statement that history was also about my background and my past, as well as linking it to why I want to study it and linking it to what I had read. So I think I'm most proud of that part. think the cringiest part of my personal statement was actually the first line, like that first section. I just read it back and I'm like, oh my gosh, they must have thought I'm like every other candidate, like everyone's gone to these places. That first line is, somber Remembrance Day services along with school trips to Meningate ingrained the sacrifices made for the freedoms we enjoy today and fueled my childhood fascination with history. And I sit there and I look at this line every time. I just think childhood fascination is a phrase that they must have read like 1,000 times, and I just cringe because I think it's one of the most commonly used phrases when discussing history in particular, and I just cringe every single time I read it. So as I had mentioned before with history, it was really hard to basically find actual work experience or put your passion into practice and like have your passion manifest through your daily actions. So the best way that I went about that was discussing the summer schools I had participated in, which showed that I took my interest beyond just books and listening to podcasts, and I had an active involvement in like LSE choice and stuff, summer school, and I think that really showed that I was willing to take time out of like my week and, you know, like summer to go to these places and find out more and become more educated about different topics I hadn't learned about before. And I had done that quite well in terms of like not necessarily like structuring it as a separate part of my personal statement, but I discussed that like after discussing everything about what I had researched, what I had done in the past, because I made the link with colonialism in the paragraph before, and I said that colonialism was a key theme discussed in the summer schools I had gone to, so that I had a passion for history beyond just books and podcasts, and it was something that really allowed me to show like my passion for history put into practice by basically explaining these summer schools. How many drafts did it actually take me to get to my final version? Honestly, countless. It was impossible. I think I had 27 drafts by the time I submitted my final thing, and this was based on the fact that I had written a first draft that was so bad and I didn't have much help from my school. So I was just editing myself. I got different people, I had my friends to look at it, and I was constantly changing it. And I think looking back on my laptop, my old laptop, my earlier eyes, you know, draft number 27, and that had been after I went to LSE's personal statement sessions, and they completely obliterated my personal statement. And then I made like 5 more changes after that. And then after I had made the changes with explaining more things, it was about, okay, now I need to cut it down to 4,000 characters. So by the time it went to uploading it to UCAS in October, it had actually been 27 drafts, which it's a tiresome process, but you get there eventually.